Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Etech Leadership Table. This is a podcast where we invite you to pull up a chair, grab a cup of coffee, and join us as we tackle some remarkable discussions on everything leadership. I'm Melissa Wood. I'm your host. I'm the Dean of Leadership Development at Etech Global Services. Welcome to the Etech Leadership Table. This is my microphone. I'm so excited. When you have a guest at the table, sometimes, you have that serious guest. Sometimes you have the smart guest. Sometimes you have the funny guest. This guest is all three wrapped in one. You guys pull up a chair, grab a cup of coffee or whatever you're drinking, and join my friend Al and I at the table, the Etech Leadership Table. Hi, Al.
Hey, Melissa. How's it going? Good morning.
It's going. I'm glad to see you here. I see you with your cup already. And so we're going to pull up to the table and just start chatting with everybody. So, hey, all my podcaster friends, you guys pull up, grab a snack, because I've been known to grab a snack or two at this table. And Al is, let me go ahead and introduce you guys to Al Hopper. He is on our Etech family. He has done pretty much, he's our data brain, and now he's working in our PI team. So we really are excited to have Al and a family member sitting at the table. So we're really happy to have you. What you probably don't know about Al, he likes coffee, but most people, you might hear podcasts of people say they like coffee, but no, nothing. And hopefully we'll share a picture of this if we have it. But Al is a coffee snob. I'm going to call him a coffee snob. Are you a coffee snob? Because if you make your own
Snob is such an ugly word. Because I'll drink any coffee. I'll drink the battery acid coffee. I mean, that's the thing. Okay. But I mean, I coffee artist.
Genius? Artist.
No,
okay.
Artist.
Because coffee artist.
You paint coffee with different strokes, the way you make it, the way you brew it, the way you roast it, even the way you drink it. So it's an art more than snobbery. Yeah, because I'll drink anyone's coffee. That just, I don't like the way that sounds.
Okay, all right. So now I'll take the snob back, and I'll give you an artist, because you are an artist. Like, I have sat in the office with you, and you showed me like the temperature when you're making coffee. What type of coffee were you making for me that day?
So we were doing a Chemex. It was the brew style. We were doing a Vietnamese medium roast. And that particular one, I believe, was a Black Rifle brand. And we did it with the Chemex. And that's just one of the brew styles. It's similar to your coffee pot, but a little bit more intimate, because you're making a smaller batch and you're doing it a little bit slower, a little bit more intentional.
Okay,
it's an artist.
That's an artist. I'll let the people at the table decide if they want to say it's snobby or not. I'll let them decide, but we'll call it artistic.
I've got some coffee here at my desk that I still got to crunch. So, I mean, it's not snobbery. It's just artistry.
You are grinding your own beans, and you had your own little equipment. I thought that was pretty awesome. So, well, Al, if since you're a family member and you're sitting at the table, and we have tons of people inside our company, outside of our company, outside of our country, all different countries that are listening to us. What do you want everyone to know about you when we start to talk about the topic of Bruce Lee's teaching, right? So I want to go on record. You are not a relative of Bruce Lee. I want to make sure we get that.
No.
As far as you know. Okay. So we're going to talk.
Sure.
Okay. So we're going to talk about Bruce Lee's theory. We're going to break some of that down today. So stay here, grab a pen, because I tell you, podcasters, if you're learning, you're writing things down. Either you're typing it to keep up with it, whatever your method is, but you need to write some things down. But Al, what do you want us to know about you?
Wow, that's a loaded question, if any. You know that, Melissa. So, I mean, I'm a family guy. I've been with Etech for a while. I've been in the call center industry for 24 years now, I think. And it was totally on accident. Not something I ever thought I was going to get into, but I did. I'm an Army brat and a veteran, which is a big part of who I am. One of the reasons I was able to find Bruce Lee was because of my time overseas. And that is also, why I embrace some of the other leadership structures like extreme ownership and servant leadership as well. Happily married to my high school sweetheart who I met in Germany in high school.
That's awesome.
That is fantastic. She's put up with me for more than half our lives together. I've got two beautiful daughters who are, enjoying their journey into adulthood. So family is a big part of who I am. And, that's who I am and what I believe. So yeah, there you go.
That's awesome. Well, welcome to the table, family. We're excited to have you here and share some of your wisdom with us. So let's just get rocking and rolling. We've used the 2 words. So that's our main focus today. You've had a really significant leadership journey, and there had to have been a pivotal moment in your journey where you started embracing both extreme ownership, and you made that significant difference for you. So can you tell me a little bit about how that worked for you and your team?
Yeah, so it was kind of an unconscious decision that just kind of brought everything together. We were building a new organization. We were tasked with doing some really significant scaling in a short period of time. And with that, a lot of things change, a lot of plans happen. And then, like Mike Tyson famously said, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And we got a couple of punches along the way when that happened. And so the idea of Be Water kind of bubbled back up to the surface. And it was something I had studied off and on with philosophy for years. Be Water is not necessarily a leadership philosophy, it's a life philosophy in a lot of ways. A lot of roots in martial arts, with Bruce Lee being the one that made it famous. It existed years before him, and the idea was you just really have to know how to flow and how to crash when you need to. The neatest thing about water is that it's the only substance on Earth that can be found in all 3 states of matter. For those science nerds out there, it can be found in the liquid form, which everyone knows about. Ice makes it a solid, and then steam makes it a vapor or gas. And so with that, you also look into the idea that water will fit into anything. Bruce Lee famously said in 1971 in an interview, when you put water in a cup, it becomes a cup. You put water in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. You have to be formless. And that was one of his biggest things when he was developing all of his philosophies and even his martial art. Jeet Kune Do was all about being formless. And the idea being you have to know when to flow and when to crash. So think about that for a moment. When you come across a challenge, you have to learn how to move around it, perhaps, right? And we've all seen water when it comes to rivers, lakes, oceans even, at the shoreline. Given enough time, water is going to find a way to victory, find a way to go where it wants to go. And that's how I really started embracing that and kind of teaching that to my young leaders that I was bringing on as part of this operation that we were scaling. And at the same time, extreme ownership was coming out from the SEALs, Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. And they really kind of just reminded me of a lot of the lessons I had learned in the military as a young leader myself. Things to the point of, there are no bad teams, only bad leaders. It's the leader's job to empower the team, and it's the leader's job to remove obstacles. So, that also kind of ties into servant leadership. The idea that, your job as a leader is to be successful through your team. And so it kind of brings all of those together, but it by using the metaphors of Be Water and the visuals that brings with you, it makes it a little easier for people to see and kind of grab a hold of.
I love it.
Yeah,
When
and it's
you,
really
when you
neat
told
because
me about when we started talking about it, it was kind of new to me. So it may be new to some of the other people sitting at the table with us. I've heard it said in different ways, but when you talk about the Bruce Lee theory, and maybe I'm just late to the game, but how you say be water, you have to how to flow and how to crash. And then when you're tying that into extreme ownership, and that must be such a balance, like, the servant leadership and the extreme ownership. All right. So what's the balance there? Like, how in the world is it a balance? Or is it the same thing? Can you kind of explain that to me? Like, how do you balance it? Is there a need to balance? Can you kind of walk me through that just a little bit?
So it's got to be a little bit of both. I mean, again, there's not one size fits all leadership style, right? And really, at its heart, even extreme ownership is servant leadership, and vice versa. There's different approach to how to teach it. There's different approaches in maybe some of the definitions that are used and some of the examples. But at its heart, it's really the same thing. Some folks might see extreme ownership, since it does have a military grounding and foundation, as being kind of rigid, or perhaps even structured. But there's some of that in servant leadership as well. The way that you approach a conversation in servant leadership is going to be structured. The way that you approach teaching someone is going to have a structure. So they both have structures, and they both have, very similar ideals, just different approaches. So to me, that's where, I guess if you had to say, you have to balance it. But at the same time, it's really kind of drawing from both and kind of bringing them together, making a leadership soup, as you would, and kind of knowing how to put the right recipe together. So yeah, I mean, that's how it kind of comes together, and you can tie all of that back with water. Not only do you need something to bring the soup together, but you got to know how to flow from one level to the other a little bit, and know when to use what tool to overcome an obstacle.
Yeah, that's priceless. I knew when you pulled up to the table it was gonna be more about coffee. Now we're having coffee and soup. I mean, come on now.
I'm a big boy. I like to eat and drink.
Me too, Al. And most of our listeners do as well. I know that they like those topics. We throw a little bit of everything in here. So you get a little bit of Bruce Lee, you get an extreme ownership, and we're talking about coffee. And we got a soup, we got a recipe going here. So stay tuned. We're working this recipe over. All right. When we think about the Bruce Lee, his teachings, right? And I know, and I didn't. When you talk about it was well before that these teachings were out, and then he just made them famous, like he's known to do, make tons of things famous. And I really like the way you tied it into Mike Tyson, talking about you don't know how you're going to respond until you're punched in the mouth, right?
Sure.
And that's the truth. And when you tie extreme ownership and you tie this Bruce Lee theory about know how to flow and how to crash, and you use that understanding of water, how you said it's going to make its way, it'll make a way, right? Yeah. It's not just going to stop, it'll make its own path. What were some key lessons for you and advice which you would give everybody today, as we're just sitting here for just pulling up and talking to you? What are some key advice and lessons from the Bruce Lee's teaching that you found, I'm going to say, transformative, and how they have shaped your approach in balancing the extreme ownership with the Bruce Lee theory?
So the biggest one, and one that I'm still trying to figure out myself, is to be formless. So the idea is, again, when you use it in the context of his martial arts, when you flow, when your enemy expands or pushes, you contract. When your opponent contracts, you expand. And so that's really a fundamental of water. again, if you think about it, it is formless. It becomes whatever you put it into. And so as a leader, not being so rigid in any system or style is so important. And when you coach, and Melissa, you talk about this all the time, when you coach someone, you have to coach where they want to be coached.
Yeah.
You have to be able to communicate to them the way they need to be communicated to. And that is just such a valuable tool in the leader's tool belt that, it is just being water. It's learning how to flow and give. I'm trying to talk to you in a certain way. I'm meeting resistance. You don't want to hear the way I'm talking to you. And so as a leader, I have to flow and learn how to change my approach. And sometimes it is crashing. Sometimes it is getting loud, even though that might not be your personality. And it can be a loud good, loud bad. I once had a division leader that loved jumping on the table in the middle of our call center while everyone's on the phones just to shout out good things. And he would say how much we did the day before, or how low the queue is, and all the different things. But he was really loud about it. And some folks really didn't react too well. Some really did. So over time, he learned where on the floor he could jump on a desk and it wouldn't impact the people around him. So he would flow around that. He still kept his style, but he learned how to adjust based on the audience. And so not being so rigid in your approach as a leader is got to be the biggest lesson that you can take away from Bruce Lee's Be Water principle. It's in all of it. Even extreme ownership kind of says the same thing at some point. Check the ego is a big part of it. Learning how to lead with decentralized command. Giving your subordinates the ability and the empowerment to make decisions on their own, because that you've trained them and given them the direction and the commander's intent in a clear enough way that you can back out of the conversation and know your team's going to deploy and get the mission done.
And that's called decentralized command? Is that what that stands for?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Where your team can execute without you yelling execution orders, right? Like telling them exactly what to do.
Yeah, it's not micromanaging. So,
right.
If you think about it in the corporate speak, right? As a micromanager, everyone hates them, right? Anyone that's ever worked for a micromanager, most people cannot stand that type of a leader, where they want to know every single thing that you're doing and making sure that you're doing it the way they want you to, instead of giving you the empowerment to know, I've got to hit 10 sales this week. I'm going to go and do them my way, and I'll get you your 10 sales.
Yeah.
Stay out of my Kool-Aid. Stay out of my coffee pot.
I really like the water analogy, and I'm seeing that just this week. I'm seeing that just lately, and about how some conflicts that have come up, right? Personally, in people's personal lives and professionally. And I believe that when I sit here and I'm listening to you, and today I'm drinking water, I know listeners, I know y'all are used to me drinking a smoothie or coffee or something, but I'm drinking water today because I did it on purpose, because Bruce Lee said we need to be like water. So I just have it here in front of me as a reminder. But when I have seen the conflict personally and professionally this week, I am seeing very little water movement. I'm seeing rigid. I'm seeing crashings. People are just rigid on their way of doing things. And it could be simply, and when you guys are listening to what Al is saying, it could be as simply as trying to figure out where we're going to go eat dinner tonight. If you are rigid in a certain way and the other person's rigid in a certain way, I can rest assure you, as someone who's been married for 30 years, we're going to not have a nice dinner. Does that make sense? But if you're like flowing like water and the other person is flowing like water, right? We can maybe agree on something. We're not rigid in our decision. And that happens in the office about decisions, financial decisions that are made. leadership positional positions, that need to change if people are rigid in what they're doing. And I think that's what's been helpful for you, Al, is you've really embraced this flow like water, right? Because I've seen you excel in, an area that you were in Etech, where you were in your past, how you did in the military, and thank you for your service, by the way. And then in this new position that you're in with our company, and you're just flowing like water. So as we start to leave, thank you for kind of giving us a sneak peek into the Bruce Lee, but what is something, and giving us some tangible things on how to balance the extreme ownership and the Bruce Lee. You don't want to be one or the other. You don't just be flowing and lose who you are. But what is something you want us to, anything additional that you want to say to our listeners that you think will help?
Yeah. So, it's important to flow. And with your example there of dinner, I'm going to go opposite of that for just a moment. So you don't want to flow too much. You need to know when to crash or when to make, a decision, right? Because otherwise you end up with conversations like we've had at my house plenty of times. Where do you want to go to dinner? I don't know. Where do you want to go to dinner? I don't know. Well, whatever you want. And then we end up, either arguing for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, trying to figure out where we're going to go, or we just don't. And we end up with leftovers. So you really kind of have to find that balance of flow and crash. And that, as a leader, that is the, really big challenge. And that's something I would want you to be cognizant of. And just being able to, again, adapt. I think that's really the adaptable part of leadership that we don't spend enough time talking about. Is, we always teach different systems. We always teach different processes. And knowing that you have to be able to think sometimes outside of those in order to get the work done. We specialize in the BPO space at Etech. And, we have agents on the phones, and I can already hear some of them watching this podcast going, but my manager doesn't let me get off the phones. My manager has to keep me on and know where I'm at. There's a time and a place for all of it, right? And you have to understand the mission and what you're trying to accomplish. And so being able to flow around that and still being able to stay within the bounds of whatever you're trying to do as a leader is very important. And so just kind of understand it's not about always flowing. It's also about fitting into the space that you're in and fitting into the culture that you're in and the job that you have in the moment. And so that is probably the most important takeaway that I can say, aside from being able to be flexible and not being rigid, but sometimes it's counterintuitive. The greatest interview Bruce Lee ever did in 1971, they call it the Lost Interview. He says exactly that. His theory on martial arts was, not having a form. It's a form without form. It's being without being, and doing it intentionally, and that is your form. And so if you can embrace that kind of idea, I think you'll be very successful.
Wow, that is powerful. I like having you at this table, Al Hopper.
I love being here.
And there's way more to Al Hopper than we've even uncovered in this little bit of time together. So you got to promise me you're going to come back. You got to promise me you'll come back to the leadership table.
Melissa, only for you and only at your invitation.
Al. Thank you, Al. I appreciate it. And there's a challenge that Al has given us, and he's given us some things that we can take away. And if the Bruce Lee is new to you, go study. Just like Al did. He didn't learn this from Bruce Lee himself. He learned this by studying Bruce Lee's teachings and extreme ownership and the servant leadership and just putting all that together. So be like water, crash when you need to, flow when you need to, serve somebody today, and just be a little bit fluid if you can. So thank you for joining us on today's episode of Etech Leadership Table. Until next time, go serve someone and be like some water, flow or crash where you need to. See you later. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Etech Leadership Table. This is a podcast where we invite you to pull up a chair, grab a cup of coffee, and join us as we tackle some remarkable discussions on everything leadership. I'm Melissa Wood. I'm your host. I'm the Dean of Leadership Development at Etech Global Services.